land in Nigeria is one of the kind of contracts that actually create room for difficulties and confusions. And as a legal mind, I have studied the Land Use Act, and I can tell you that when you want to buy a land, there are certain things that you must do, there are certain guidelines that you must follow, there are certain things that you must ensure that is done before that sale or conveyance of that landed property is effected. And if these are not followed, you are actually creating a room for future confusions and difficulties. And if possible, you may lose that particular land because you didn't appreciate these principles during the course of the sale. Firstly, it is important to note that according to Nigerian law, the sale or conveyance of a land or any other landed property is a contractual agreement. This means that for the contract to actually be valid and enforceable in the eyes of the law, you must, while buying that land, while purchasing that land, while getting or selling that land, recognize the principles and the rules that have been established by the law for individuals who are getting a landed property to follow, so as to ensure when there is any difficulties, you can actually enforce that agreement. And fundamentally, it is important to appreciate these principles and guidelines so as to ensure the land you are buying, the sale you are making, and the transfer of any landed property you are doing is valid in the eyes of the law.
So, if you are a real estate manager, if you intend to purchase any landed property, if you are a lawyer, a law student, or anyone that must actually become acquainted with the sale or transfer of any land, this video is for you. When you are buying a land, when you are purchasing any landed property, as long as it pertains to a land and as long as that transaction is governed by the Sales of Goods Act and the Land Use Act, these specific things that I'm supposed to mention are the things that you must do to ensure that that sale is valid. Not just to ensure that the sale is valid, to ensure that you actually prevent the creation of a room for future difficulties and confusions with respect to that sale. Firstly, when you want to buy a land, one of the first things you must do is to ensure that the person who is selling that land is actually the real owner of the land. Because according to law as expressly provided for in section 21 of the Sales of Goods Act, anyone who sells a property that is not actually his own would render that sale invalid, provided that particular sale does not fall under any of the exceptions in this particular act. What am I trying to say? I'm simply trying to say that when you are buying any landed property as a buyer, one of the first things, which is the most fundamental thing that you must ensure, is that the person or the real estate company who is making that sale actually has the legal capacity to sell that land. This means that they must actually be the owner of the land. And the way this can be done is that you ensure there is the existence of a document known as the Certificate of Occupancy. The certificate of occupancy is a legal document which shows that somebody is actually the owner of a particular land. So if you see that there is an existence of a certificate of occupancy referring to that person who is making the sale as the real owner of the land or as the agent of the owner of the land, then you should be rest assured, alongside every other thing that I will be listing, that that person has a valid title over that land. Secondly, when you want to buy a land, apart from the fact that you must ensure that there is an existence of a certificate of occupancy, another thing you must note is that there is what is called a registered survey plan. A registered survey plan is a legal document which is registered, showing the identification of the land, which includes the location of the land, the exact size of the land, the boundary of the land, and every other thing that pertains to the physical identification of the land. The reason this is important is because so many people, after buying a land, they now become defendants in an action for trespass, not because the sale was not valid, but because there was some confusion as to the specific size of that land that they bought. And this is very important if you are buying just a portion of a large hectare of land, because that survey plan that is being issued would ensure that the size of that land, the location of that land, the description of that land, and everything that pertains to the physical identification of that land is provided for. Apart from that, another thing you must ensure when purchasing a land is that the proper document that makes for the validation of that particular contract for the sale of that land is executed. This document is known as the deed of assignment or the deed of conveyance. So you must ensure when buying a land, because according to the law, the land is one of the purchase of a land is one of the contracts that must be in writing to be enforceable. So therefore, to prevent future difficulties when there is a dispute as to the title of the land you've already bought, you must ensure that there is a deed of conveyance. The purpose of the deed of conveyance is to establish that there was actually a transfer of a landed property from Mr. A to Mr. B. One of the major things you must do also is to ensure that you confirm the registration of that land, and this is done by going to the nearest land registry. When you get to that land registry, the land has some identification, and once the exact number of that land is searched on the system, it would bring out all the details of that land, including the owner of the land and other details you need for that sale. It will also tell you if there are actually disputes with respect to that land during the course of a proceeding. Apart from that, you must also ensure that you check if the land is under government acquisition, because there are some particular lands that are in the possession of the government in that particular locality. And when you buy that land thinking it is for an individual, in subsequent days, the government, if they want to actually use that land, would use it, and it will not constitute a trespass because it's under government acquisition. And the only thing that they may actually do is to compensate you for the use of that land. However, the initial sale that you made is invalid and void according to law. And another thing you must also note is that the governor's consent of the land is available, because in that it is the governor's consent that ensures that a resale of a particular land is valid. A governor's consent is always available in land that have been sold before. It is just simply a document that implies that the governor of that particular locality, the government of that particular state, has given you his consent to resell that land. And fundamentally, the major thing you must ensure you do when buying, purchasing, or making the transfer of any landed property is that you get a lawyer, a barrister, or a solicitor. Because as a layman, there are some certain things we don't understand. It is only the lawyer that has the ability to understand the terms that have been put in this contractual document. It is also your lawyer that will assist you in ensuring these different conditions that I have noted are satisfied. Buy your land, invest in your property, but ensure that the relevant rules that makes for the validation of that transfer is abided to. Thank you so much for your time. Do follow the MS Legal Nuggets page to ensure you are notified when more insightful nuggets and legal tips are sent.